I'm Richard Brown, and I'm a reader in modern literature in the School of English at the University of Leeds. And much of my work is about modern literature and, consequently, the modern novel. Now, I sometimes get asked by students, and even by interested people outside the university, very basic questions about reading novels. How do you read a novel, they might ask. What they might really mean to ask is, how do you read a novel professionally, as an academic critic or as a literary intellectual? What does it mean to read a novel as an expert on novels? After all, isn't reading a novel something we can all do, at least all of us who can read? And if we can read, then don't we already know what it's about? Well, one way to get beyond this very basic level is to begin by asking the examiners what they see as the most common weaknesses to be overcome. Typically, when they evaluate student essays and exam performance on novels, academic critics and teachers of literature tend to comment that the weaker efforts rely too much on simple or literal description of content, that they assume that novels are realistic, or assume that they too simply voice the supposed views of the author. Examiners complain that students write as if fictional characters are real people in the world, and that they don't write with enough awareness of narrative strategy and form. Reading such comments, we might be forgiven for thinking that it's much easier to say how not to read a novel than to say how to do it. All of these examiners would be quick to agree that there's no one single method for reading a novel. Yet most would also recognise that there are certain basic forms and figures through which all narrative prose writing operates, and that approaching these can provide readers with a set of tools with which to unpick narrative prose strategy and effect, whatever our ultimate approach to a novel's meaning might be. And I'd like to keep strategy and effect in view for a moment here, and postpone questions of judgment and meaning as such, by quoting from a famous modern novelistic practitioner, Virginia Woolf, who herself in 1926 wrote a lecture for schoolgirls with the title, How Should One Read a Book? In this lecture, she said, to read a book well, one should read it as if one were writing it. Begin not by sitting on the bench among the judges, but by standing in the dock with the criminal. Now, I like this comment, not so much because it takes attention away from the novel and back to the novelist. We've already seen that this might be a problem for some weaker readings. I like it because it encourages us to consider fictional production as a kind of creative production, novels as things that are made, and whose processes of manufacture we can appreciate and even participate in as readers. I also like it because Woolf's metaphor of the criminal in the dock makes us realise that writing's always a bit subversive, and that reading isn't necessarily a process of passive, obedient absorption, but can also be a disobedient, subversive, or even maybe in some sense, kind of criminal act.